You didn't give up. You never started. And somewhere in your chest right now, you know exactly what I mean. There's something you've been wanting to do for months, maybe years, and every time you get close, close enough to almost begin, something happens. Not laziness, not fear, something quieter than that. Something that feels almost rational. That's what we need to talk about. Everyone calls it procrastination. Therapists call it avoidance. Self-help books call it resistance. Your family calls it wasted potential. But none of them are right, because what's actually happening inside you is far more intelligent than any of those words suggest. You're not stuck because you're weak. You're stuck because some part of your mind made a decision a long time ago, a decision that made complete sense at the time, and it has been protecting you ever since. Protecting you from something you might not even remember anymore. The question isn't why you won't try. The question is, what did trying once cost you? Picture a classroom. You're 8 years old. You raise your hand. You're almost certain you have the answer. Your heart is going fast, not from fear, not yet, from excitement. You want to be right. You want them to see you. The teacher calls on you. You say the answer, and it's wrong. Not catastrophically wrong, just wrong. But the room shifts. Someone laughs, maybe just one person, and you feel it move through your body like cold water. Your face goes hot. You look down at the desk, and something registers. Not a thought, a feeling, cellular, below language. Don't do that again. You probably don't remember that moment or something like it, but your nervous system does. It filed it under a category it created just for occasions like this. The category is called, What Happens When You Let People See You Try. You went home that day and you were fine. You ate dinner, you watched TV, you went to bed. But the rule had already been written. Keep it inside, where it's safe, where it's still perfect, where no one can touch it. And the dream, the painting, the business, the song, the application, stayed exactly there, inside, untouched, perfect forever. Psychologists have a term for what you just felt in that story. They call it defensive pessimism. But that term doesn't do it justice, because it sounds like a flaw, a cognitive distortion, something to be corrected. It isn't. Defensive pessimism is a survival strategy. It's what the mind builds when hope has been punished enough times that hoping starts to feel dangerous. Think about that. Hope, feeling dangerous. For some people, optimism isn't a default state. It's a risk they've calculated and decided they can't afford. Because if you don't try, you can't fail. And if you can't fail, no one sees it. And if no one sees it, you stay safe inside the version of yourself that is still capable of everything. Potential is the most comfortable place to live, because potential has no evidence against it. This is what psychologists call identity protection. You are not protecting your future, you are protecting your self-concept, the story of who you still could be. And as long as you never test it, that story remains intact. There's another layer. Many people who stop before they start were raised in environments where emotions were suppressed, not through cruelty necessarily, but through modeling. Parents who worked without complaining, who swallowed disappointment, who taught without words that emotions were inefficient. So you learn to do the same. You learn to bury the desire before it could be embarrassing to you, before it could need something from someone else, before it could fail publicly and require you to be comforted. Psychologists call this emotional suppression, but you've always just called it being realistic. That's what makes this so invisible. It doesn't feel like fear. It feels like wisdom. Let me show you something. Think about the last 3 things you wanted to do but didn't start. Now ask yourself, at what specific point did you stop? Not at the failure, not at the rejection. Before any of that. Right at the edge of visibility. Right at the moment it would have become real to someone else. The application sat in drafts. The first chapter never left the notebook. You researched the course for 2 months and never enrolled. You talked about it, thought about it, planned it, and then quietly let it dissolve. That's not random. That's a pattern. And patterns have origins. Somewhere, at some point, being seen trying and failing cost you something you couldn't afford to lose. Maybe it was respect. Maybe it was love. Maybe it was the one belief that kept you going, that you were more than others thought. And so you made a deal with yourself. I will want this, I just won't pursue it. That way, I still get to be someone who wants things. It's not laziness, it's grief management. You are grieving in advance, protecting yourself from a loss that hasn't happened yet. Here is what no one will tell you. The thing you're afraid of is not failure. Failure you could survive. You've survived things harder than failure. What you're actually afraid of is trying your hardest and still not being enough. Because as long as you never try your hardest, that truth stays untested. You can always say, I didn't really go for it. That sentence is a lifeline. It keeps the possibility alive. It keeps you alive in a specific way. But it also keeps you exactly here. Every year, slightly more tired, slightly more distant from the version of yourself you still believe in, slightly more fluent in the language of someday. And someday is a country with no borders and no exit. Here is the reframe you've been waiting for, but didn't know you needed. The mind that built this system, the one that learned to protect you by keeping you still, is not your enemy. It is extraordinarily competent. It built the most elegant possible solution to a real problem you once had. The problem is gone, but the solution is still running. You're carrying armor for a war that ended years ago. You are not broken. You are not lazy. You are not afraid of success. You are not self-sabotaging in some mysterious, unknowable way. You adapted to a classroom that made you feel small, to a family that needed you to be low maintenance, to a world that moved fast and never once asked if you were keeping up. You built the most logical possible defense system, and it worked. You're still here. But there's a cost to armor worn too long. It starts to feel like skin. You forget it was ever a choice. You forget there was ever a version of you that raised their hand without thinking. That version still exists. Not somewhere in your future. Somewhere in your past, right before the moment the room went cold, there was a person who wanted things freely, who hadn't yet learned to hide the wanting. You don't need to go back to that person, but it might be worth remembering they were real, and that the hand went up before it knew it could be wrong. If something in this video felt like it was written about you specifically, it wasn't, but also it was, because this pattern is more common than anyone wants to admit. It just gets talked about in the language of what's wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you. If this opened something, let it stay open for a while.